welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be sharing with you one of my favorite recipes for cha or chai. So depending on where you come from, there's so many different configurations of cha that you can make. I mean, nowadays you can get it at your local coffee shop or at Starbucks or even the grocery store in a concentrated form. But the best way to make it is at home in your own special way. Depending on where you're from in the world, you may use certain spices and there's all different kinds of blends. So you might be wondering, where did this awesome drink come from? So the belief is about 5,000 to 9,000 years ago, it was used in the royal courts as an Ayurvedic health tonic. And the great thing is, you can make it your own. It's a drink that my grandfather had every single day, that a lot of your family members may drink, and I know personally it's one of the favorite things that I bring to potlucks that my friends always rave about. So let me show you my recipe and share some fun little tricks that you can do at home. You're gonna start off first with a cup of clean water. And depending on if you're using a dairy milk or a non-dairy milk, it's gonna change the configuration of how much water. I'll put it in the comments on what to do and to adjust the recipe if you are using a dairy milk. I am not using a dairy milk. I will be using oat milk today, but you can use coconut, hemp, whatever your preference is. Traditionally, in cha, which actually in about the 1930s when the British were in India, they started using black tea or Earl Grey in traditional cha recipes. But 2 years ago, I went to South Africa and I fell in love with Roobis. So Roobis is great. It's a non-caffeinated tea. It's a red tea usually. The great thing is that it has really high antioxidants and it's great for your body. And the no caffeine means no jitters, but you could also use a mix of half Roobis and half black tea if that's your preference to have a little bit of caffeine. Depending on how strong you like your tea, I'm gonna put about 3 spoons, actually, we're gonna make it a little stronger. I'm gonna put 4 spoons of loose leaf organic Roobis tea. If you're using a pot, obviously, feel free to just give it a little stir. So then, to 1 cup of water, because I'm using a non-dairy milk, I'm gonna add actually 3 cups of oat milk. And if you wanna speed up the recipe, what you could do is have a separate pot for the milk and be heating that up at the same time that you're heating up the tea. We're not in any rush today, so we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way. So you start noticing the tea is starting to get to a simmer. You want to have the heat on medium. In this case, we want to actually develop the flavor of the tea. We kind of almost want to roast it in the water. So you're going to allow it to start to boil. You'll start noticing the corners of the pot or the teapot starting to bubble up. And that's when you know it's time to add the milk. And already you can see the really beautiful rich tea color. And now we're gonna add my favorite part, the spices. So almost all tea spices have usually ginger, cinnamon, and my preference is Celyon. We'll talk about that later. Cardamom and black pepper. Now, in a lot of different places, you'll see that people will put star anise or fennel seed. Again, it's the same thing, whatever is your preference, but today I'm gonna be using cardamom, Celyon cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, and a little bit of black pepper. So we're gonna use about a half teaspoon to 3/4 teaspoon cardamom. Now I'll add a full teaspoon because I love cardamom. And then we're gonna add half to 3/4 teaspoon cinnamon. And again, same thing, I like my tea very spiced, so I'm gonna add a full teaspoon. Gonna be doing actually a whole teaspoon of ginger. Cold in LA a little bit, and ginger is great for digestion, for warming the blood and circulation. Now you could also use fresh ginger and it would add a really nice spicy element to the tea. And I'm just gonna add a quarter of a teaspoon of nutmeg. So traditionally in the morning tea, I won't put nutmeg because nutmeg can actually help you sleep. So if I have a sleepy time tea, nutmeg is definitely going in it. And then we're gonna do some fresh ground black pepper. Might seem a little crazy drinking black pepper in your morning beverage or in your daytime beverage, but black pepper has tons of health benefits. It's really great for digestion. It actually reduces gas in the body, and just in general, it's a warming and anti-inflammatory thing. Capsaicin, which comes from peppers, helps actually reduce inflammation and pain in the body too. So this is definitely a drink that you're gonna love in your mouth, but also love in your body as well. Truthfully, I don't usually measure my spices, but these measurements will give you just a slight nice taste of all the spices without overwhelming your palate. So if you're not used to drinking spicy things, then it's nice to just kind of ease yourself into it. You can always add more the next time you make it. I think one of the big things to really remember about cooking in general is don't be scared of using spices. If you make a mistake, guess what? You'll try again, and it's not really such a bad thing because sometimes the best dishes come from the most unexpected mistakes. So while we're waiting for the new mixture to come to a boil, something I love adding is fresh mint to my tea. Now, the reason I do this is mint is a coolant for the body, it's a natural digestive, and with Ayurvedic principles, you're balancing hot and cold. And the thing about cha is that it can balance the heat in your body and also cool you off if you have too much, or if you need warming, it'll warm you up. Now, my grandfather loved fresh mint. So in India, when I used to go visit them, he would always let me make his tea, and he'd always tell me to run into the garden and get him fresh mint. So I, of course, have to grow my own mint. And I have 2 different varieties. And because we're gonna be straining the tea anyway, we don't really need to, tear the leaves off. We're gonna put the leaves and the stem right into the thing. I'm just giving it a little twist to help release the oils and then putting it right in. Give it a nice little stir. I wish you could smell my kitchen right now because it smells pretty dang amazing. Now we're just gonna let it simmer. We're gonna let the spices infuse. And in the traditional Indian way, what we would do is if we wanted a very strong tea, we would bring the tea to a boil and let it almost start to overflow in the pot, but then reduce the heat quickly so that it simmers back down and bring it to a boil that way about 2 or 3 times. In our language, we say kadak, and that means basically, kadak means kind of hardness. So it's the strength of the tea essentially. I personally like my tea a little soft. So this is what I mean by bringing it to a boil, and before it gets to the halfway point, you want to reduce the heat because otherwise it will overflow and make a mess. We're gonna actually shut the stove off now because we've got it the perfect consistency. And I'm actually gonna add a little more cardamom and a little more cinnamon because again, like I said, I like my tea really spiced. Today we're gonna sweeten this with an organic maple syrup, but you can use raw honey if you consume honey. You can use rock sugar or whatever your sweetener of preference is. Monk fruit is a great one too if you're not doing any sweets. It'll give it a nice little sweetness. In India, we use this tiny rock sugar, which I remember as a kid because if there was a couple little pellets at the bottom, you'd drink the end of the tea and then you get that little crunchy sugar if it hadn't melted fully. We're gonna do some maple syrup. Now that the heat is off, we're adding the maple syrup in. And I'm gonna make this one a little bit of a sweeter tea. So I'm adding about, I'm gonna say 3 tablespoons of maple syrup and give it one more stir. You can use a fine mesh strainer. You can get them at pretty much most kitchen stores or online. Or if you don't have that, you can use cheesecloth and strain it into that. But if you are in an Indian household, for sure they have one of these there most likely. So it's definitely gonna be a little too hot to drink, but it just smells amazing. It also makes a great post-dinner drink. Like I said, you just adjust the spices and it's great for digestion. Thanks so much guys for coming to my kitchen today. I can't wait to share more with you. Please feel free to leave any comments on how you make your tea at home. And I'd love to know what kind of recipes you guys want to see from me. Much love, much light. And don't forget, the secret ingredient is always love. So good.